This is Japan Baseball Weekly, the only English podcast covering all 12 NPB teams. And now, your hosts, John E. Gibson and Jim Allen.
Hi, and welcome to the Japan Baseball Weekly podcast. It's for the week of September 21st. I'm John Gibson, and with me, what time is it? Late on a Sunday night, early on a Monday morning is Jim Allen. How you doing, bud?
Oh, I'm doing well. I'm sort of like I'm not really a morning person anymore.
And I'm not really a night owl anymore. But we're going to make it work, right?
Oh, yeah. So
I'm going to make it work.
Yeah, for me, it's not a stretch. I wish I could get off of this cycle of getting up at around noon and getting to sleep at 3 or 4 in the morning, but it looks like another round of that tonight.
Well, for you and me both, bud. All right. On this week's show, we have no chat with a player or coach, so we're going to go straight to HighHeat. You guys are going to be the guests, and we're going to answer some of your questions, and we're going to look at the playoff Giants, the falling Eagles, and hit a few notes. So let's start swinging.
Clearing the bases!
All right, so both Jim and I tried to get an interview. It was Jim's turn, I'll have you know that, so I didn't try as hard early on, but neither one of us was successful, and it didn't happen.
Yeah, it seemed like it was gonna. But I'll tell you, I don't mean to be mean, but one of the artifacts or effects of the coronavirus pandemic has been for kind of authoritarian regimes to assert their ability to, restrict access to either human rights or various other parts of people's lives.
Right, exercising their strength.
Yeah, exactly. And I've seen this before, and you see this sometimes with some teams, PR departments in the past, and where if somebody's in big demand, the PR department can get really pushy. The PR guys are like, "You're talking to our star without our approval." And I'm going, dude, we're just standing here talking. Who said you could
settle down there, Skippy?
Exactly. Like, who gave you permission to stand? And we've seen it, and I guess most infamously with the Hanshin Tigers. And I asked a colleague about how a colleague who has been going to the ballpark more often has been reaching out to teams more vigorously than I have. And he said, when you call the Tigers and ask for an interview over the telephone or internet, pretty much you don't even have to finish saying, I'd like an interview, before you can hear people snickering in the background.
Hashtag HighHeat.
Yeah. So we've been very fortunate up to now, and someone actually asked on the MPB Reddit or subreddit or whatever it is that I set up an account there, and they asked, when are you guys going to get some Tigers on? And I said, we are trying.
I know.
We are trying. And with the Giants, I said earlier on in this whole thing that I wouldn't name names, but it's time to name names. The Giants, I've sent 3 requests, and they've been smacked back at me like a bad fastball.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna burn bridges yet, because I think there are other people holding the torch at the other end. I'll let them do it. But this was a case of the player was ready, the team seemed ready. I think it's just not time. It wasn't, the timing wasn't right, but. Sometimes I don't mean to, and I don't mean this to be mean, but when there's a vacuum, somebody fills it. And there was a player who's a first-year player, and he doesn't want to step on toes, so he asked the team, and if you ask the team, can I do this? Any of you who've worked for a Japanese company, is it okay if I do this normal thing? Well, we don't have that in our manual, so therefore I guess the answer is no.
Or this time it's not on the agenda at the moment, so
exactly.
Let's hold off.
It was like put my pencil on the left side of the table. Well, don't. If you had done it, nobody had asked nobody. If you hadn't asked, it would have been no problem. But as soon as you ask, it's an issue. So
Right.
it was
So,
that
yeah.
kind of thing. It was, we found, I think for, just to be honest, I think we just found a gap in their bureaucratic method. And when that happens, sometimes things can ground to a halt if you're trying to get permissions.
Right. So that's just one of the stories. But we've been really fortunate up to now, and we
and I
are
will
still
name
working.
names, and I'll say the Nippon Ham fighters have been superb. I mean, like,
Yeah, I think
and they
everybody
say,
knows
how
that.
can we help?
Yeah, I think everybody knows the teams that have been very cooperative because we've had the guests on
The
the
Eagles
show.
have been relatively helpful, but a lot,
Right.
again, the teams also have more. And I'll be fair, as much as I'm not normally fair, but I'll be fair and say that the teams are also dealing with the coronavirus, and their guys are not all on the same schedule and on the same travel. I think they're traveling a little lighter, fewer people.
That would make sense.
And their PR guys are like not always with the team as much as they used to be.
Okay.
And when we arranged the Alan Busenitz interview, the person I was in contact wasn't with the team in I think they were in Tokorozawa.
Okay. Right.
So it's not easy, and I appreciate the for all you PR guys who are giving it your best shot. I really appreciate it.
And I think the listeners do, and I do. So let's move along. Let's not dwell. We can't have Alonzo Powell on the show every week, but I know he's there for us if we need him, and we'll probably be calling him soon. Anyway, let's go to fielding questions. All right, so the first one comes from Dimitri, and it comes via email.
And he says, thanks for the show. I always love to listen, even when I'm fuming, like when you discussed the concept of sample size in last week's show. Now, this is 2 weeks ago. You said, and he's talking about me, John, you said that the sample size is an completely arbitrary word that has no numeric value, that all these baseball nerds like to assign to everything they like to quantify, except sample size has none of that. And he noted the time. That was 26 minutes, 15 seconds into the last show. He continues, nobody has qualified this thing. Nobody has said, what a good sample size is, this number. I haven't heard it. Have you? That's at 30 minutes, 53 seconds. Now, this is objectively false. It is not true that it is not quantified. Sample size is a well-characterized concept, and there are various methods to calculate the appropriate sample size for a given question you want to address. Baseball is even a textbook example when people are taught about sample size and significance. Literally, it really is used as an easy example in stats textbooks. Could it be that you actually meant something else? Do you want to clarify this? Thanks. Dimitri.
All right. So I'm glad, Dimitri, thank you very much for noting this matter. And obviously we can't debate this because I'm always going to have the last say here on the show. So I just first want to thank you because I actually think I've said more controversial things throughout the years. So I didn't think this was very controversial, especially because I went on to explain my argument. And I'll give you this. I didn't do a good job of articulating my position in my initial statement. And when I basically put the notion that sample size is this nebulous and arbitrary number that's out there that's not quantified. But I went on to explain it. And I think you latched onto that first statement like a police dog on a training arm pad. And you didn't let go. And when we were exchanging Twitter messages, all the examples that you brought up at that time were examples of me talking about people, not the sample size. And then when we got to the email, you actually, with the timestamps that you used, followed it up by stating the first portion of my comment, which was after I could actually hear Jim either steaming or snickering. I couldn't make out which one it was. I think he was both. He was kind of angry.
I was pretty much steaming. There was actually the smoke alarm went off in my apartment.
So anyway, but I did follow up by saying clearly I thought that the application of the phrase in generally offered arguments that come up on a lot of podcasts or a lot of sports shows that I watch. The actual application of the phrase is poorly used. It's poorly laid out. And what I mean by that is these people either misuse sample size. So they say, yes, it's a small sample size, but, and then they go on to use some stats that they need or want to use in a particular argument. And like I said, I could sense Jim fuming when I said it, but I think I made the point later on that I'm talking about the way people use it and that they don't give a quantity. So a lot of times people say, oh, well, it's still a small sample size, but maybe it's not at that point. But we don't ever know because we don't give numbers. And one of the things Dimitri did on Twitter was he mentioned the fact that I don't like to look at the standings, until about 2 months have gone by. But see, for me, I never say small sample size or large sample size.
But it's the same thing.
I give a time frame.
Sure. But
And
again,
that's
it is the
difference.
same thing.
I assign a number. I quantify what I'm talking about, and I try to give figures. I don't say small and large. Small and large, those are not figures. Those are not numbers. That's just an arbitrary. It could mean a lot of different things to different people. When I say small sample size, it could be a different number from what you think is small sample size, and large sample size could be a just totally different number. So that's what I mean when I say the whole thing. Now, I know that the science is there. I know it's out there and it exists, but the application and the way people present it when they're making arguments, I think is frankly abused by many who really don't even take time to offer us anything that has a quantification that lets us know what they're talking about. They just want to use the phrase sample size to make a point, and that's how they do it. So my argument is not with the science. It is with the people and whoever we hear who make that statement in that manner. And a lot of times, like I said, you hear me offer up a time frame. You hear me offer up some numbers, or I say I just say it's too early to decide. Even with a guy we might talk about in the coming months, Koji Fukutani of the Dragons, he has pitched well as a starter, but we've seen him pitch well as a starter. So what? I'm not convinced that he's going to be that guy next year or even for the rest of this year. But he has pitched well, and what you are saying is essentially the sample size of his performance is too small for you to consider it a valid indicator of what he can do. I didn't say that.
No, but that's what you are saying.
You can. Anybody can interpret and reword and rephrase things that you want to, and that's fine. That's another way of saying it.
Yes, I agree.
I'm saying I haven't seen him do enough. I'm not going to use the phrase sample size because I want to put in, I don't actually know how many starts or how many appearances in a season or in a career for a guy before we understand what he is. I don't know that.
The answer is never. There is no number because it's. I'm sorry. I apologize for interrupting you, but I thought maybe.
Oh, this time?
Only once. So you only get that once a month, and so
we could barely get through the opening, and now we're here, and now you're apologizing. But
no, I'm only going to apologize once a month.
Oh, Jesus, that's starting today. But anyway, no, that's fine, and I don't know what it is either, and that's part of that nebulous thing that I'm talking about with sample size. Do we really honestly know? Sure, the science is out there. But when we are making statements about guys, about their career arcs, about their career paths, do we know? Do we really honestly know?
No, you never know. You never know. And you never know because everything has an element of randomness. Whatever happens, you don't know how much of it is is simply how much of it is due to a person's individual ability, how much of it is due to the competition, how much of it is due to the park, the wind, the defense, whatever you're measuring, you never know, how much of B is caused by A.
I totally agree. I even have a story about it. I went when I was back in the States for that short stint, 2003, 2004. I
seemed like a long stint to me when I was trying to get you back here.
Yeah, it was long for me too in some other ways. But anyway, I was covering a high school team, and I kept getting calls from a coach who said, you got to come out and see this player. And he had great stats and everything. And I'm like, well, okay, but you're a really small high school. And, I've heard about these kinds of guys before. So anyway, I went out to see him, and I didn't just go out to see one game. I started following him around for a couple of weeks to put the whole thing into context, because if you see a guy one time or two times, you might see something great or really bad and then make a decision. So I wanted to follow him around, and I did. And I saw that, and this was a baseball player in this instance, but I did the same thing with a basketball player before as well. And I could just see that, I could see things in the swing. Now, I wasn't as good at evaluating talent, but even back then, there's things that you can see. And the things that I could see were instances that you just mentioned, which was the competition level, the parks, and the fact that the coaches and other players on the bench were keeping score and marking hits for him on balls that, we're talking about high school kids. They didn't want to always get in front of a ball that was hard hit. We're talking to a guy who had some strength, but he was not big in stature and was using an aluminum bat. And I just put things together and said, look, I don't see it. I don't see where I need to go out and cover this guy all the time, where he's not the kind of athlete I think is a huge scholarship kind of player. So I told the coach, look, good luck, but I'm not going to be out there that much driving around.
I hear you. That's hard. As a journalist, there are people who want stories told, and I can't resist a good story, but sometimes you got to say to them, it is a good story at this point, but right now it ain't.
Yeah, it is.
And I feel bad about that, because I hate to disappoint people, but I'm also, a human being.
Right. You are.
Well, thank you for vouching for me.
I haven't seen you in a while, but I know this to be true. Okay. So hopefully I've explained it a little bit better. And most of it for me is not the numbers and the science. It is 90% the way people use the word and the phrase sample size. Yeah. And they don't tell us, if they were to tell us, okay, we need at least this many at bats from this kind of player in this kind of situation. And I know the factors are all different, but you need to present that. If it's going to be something that's scientific, you need to present that to the listener. Otherwise, it's not only not quantified for the listener, it's not fair for the person you're talking about either.
Well,
so that's my opinion. But I do thank you for bringing that up, Dimitri. Although, like I said, I really think I've said more controversial things through the years than this.
Not that I remember at this instant. Give me a minute. I read that again, and I thought there's a couple of points here, and I certainly agree with some of the things you're saying. And I think some of the confusion about what you were saying was because it was in juxtaposition. It's often not exactly the words we use and what we intend, but it's sometimes the surrounding context.
Mm-hmm.
If you put a picture in a painting and it has no frame, it looks different than the picture in the paint. The picture with a frame.
Correct.
It changes things, and part of it was the juxtaposition and the language you used, which was, you used a word that some would consider pejorative, nerds.
It was combative. Yeah.
And, so the nerds are bad, but baseball math is okay. And so that, that put it in a context of A is good and B is bad. And I think we want to get away from that, as you have tried to do so. And I think, and I agree with you in the sense that it's how people use the language. Now, whenever I don't have a problem with someone saying, it's a small number of events, but this is how it happened. It's 10 at bats, but it's kind of a fun, it's a fun thing at that stage. It's not a meaningful thing, but it's a fun thing. And I get that when I hear it. But having said that, what you said, something you said just now really hit it on the head, which is when especially people in the media are trying to make a point. Now, they could be people in the media in a blog, and they could be trolls on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the sort of the latter type that tends to get our ire more often than not. But the historic use of numbers by people in sports is not, as Bill James once said, was not to educate, but to sort of illustrate, to make a point without actually getting to it wasn't about learning what is true. It's, I've got a story about a player who's good, so I'm going to select the numbers that make him look good. It's decoration. Use numbers to decorate stories, like photos. And
or decorate a point.
Yeah.
Point
he's a good hitter, so let's say, he hits 300, so he's a quality player, which is two things that aren't not necessarily true, but it never stopped any sports writer from saying it at least once in their life.
I heard a phrase on TV a long, long time ago, and I think it's applicable to stats in some cases. The phrase was, God uses the good ones, the bad ones use God. And I think we could turn that around and use it with stats sometimes, because, don't let the stats, don't use the stats, let the stats use you. And I think that's what I'm getting at, is that sometimes when I hear these stats, it's that people are trying to make a point, and they're trying to, and at least finding at least some aspect that they can twist and use for themselves to their benefit.
Sure. Again, this is the point of, see, this is my point. This supports my point of view, as opposed to, really the best work, the most knowledge is gained by asking questions. Is this true? How close do we know this is true? Do we know, is there evidence that it's true? Is there evidence that it's false? Not A is a good hitter and this is why, but is A a good hitter is a much more interesting question. Okay, what's good? And what's good about him? And, and let's look at all the evidence we have instead of just the stuff that looks good in my story.
Gotcha.
So that's good. But that's a traditional thing for the media is to do that. And we had this horrible example. I don't remember if it was, how many years ago it was. It was before Ichiro Suzuki was traded to the New York Yankees, and the Yankees the Mariners came to Japan for an opening series. Remember that? 2000.
I do.
Or two. Anyway, It was his last year with the Mariners, and some person with the Yomiuri Shimbun, we were instructed to translate the Japanese stories into English. And one of the writers wrote, we all know that, it'll be important for Ichiro to have a good game, because we all know that how somebody does on opening day is an indicator of how they will do in the rest of the season. And you remember that one?
I do remember that. And
I just laughed. I think I said to John, if you ever write this, I'm going to smack you upside the head.
And I thought, if I ever wrote this, I will have been smacked upside the head already. That's why I wrote it.
Perhaps, yeah. We would have to call the company concussion protocols. So, yeah, so that's the thing, that people often do that, and people in the media have, fans are as bad as us, and I'm not immune to that. I am brief with explanations, just because you can't fill an article with every which way of analysis. Articles aren't analysis; they're articles. So anyway, moving along. But I thought it was a good thing, and the only thing I have to say about sample size is, I mean, it is a thing, and it is a thing, but it's like if the window is open, is the window open? Yes, it is. Well, is it really open or is it a little open? I mean, it depends on what you want, and sample size is like that too. Essentially, the numbers, and I'm not a statistician, so I apologize to you statisticians. It essentially works on on an expression called confidence level. How confident are you that this reflects, this number reflects A? And when it's very low, I mean, typically it goes like, I'll do it really briefly. Let's say a guy has 500 at bats and he hits 300. You could tell that in his context, you might say something like there's an 85% confidence interval that his real batting average is, what did I say, 250? If a guy hits 250 and 500 at bats, we'll say, okay, given the number of at bats, we'll assume with 85% chance that his true batting average is somewhere between 215 and 280, 290 or something.
All right. Well, or something is the operative phrase, because if we really try to explain all this stuff, we will never finish.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just saying that. So the more numbers you get, the smaller that area of where you're confident gets, to where, he's between a 240 and a 260 hitter. Okay, now we really know. But that's what happens, is that range shrinks the bigger the sample size. So, and it depends on, and the sample size depends on, as I said last time, how variable the thing you're trying to measure is. If it's something that's very independent of outside forces, like home runs, strikeouts, and walks, relatively independent, then the samples are smaller. So anyway, moving along.
All right. Yes. Brakes. Hit the brakes. Hit the brakes, Jim. Stop.
I'm pumping.
All right. All right. The next one is from Michael West Bay, and this came in a text message or SMS, a short message across the phone.
He says, "Hi guys, I just listened to the latest show. Nikon Sports reported on September 7th that the government had given NPB the go-ahead to increase to half capacity, or 20,000, whichever is lower, what is what the J-League came up with. Soon after the NPB J-League task force met on Saturday, and I'm assuming this was September 5th, I started getting email from teams announcing that they were going to about half capacity minus 1,000. Teams that thought about it a little longer are issuing 5,000 more tickets for games starting the 19th of September. As for what areas are mostly blank, they're the cheap seats. The Alps at Cochin. You don't get to keep the bleacher bums out of the outfield there. And the outfield and wing at Yokohama. And the upper deck and a few domes."
Thank you for the update, Michael. And I saw a similar report this year, but my opinion from last week was based on the actions of the country during the early times of the coronavirus situation. And I have no doubt that the government is backing this. And when I say backing, I mean arms folded,